In 1998, Southend cinema goers saw the closure of the last of the town's 27 traditional picture houses. It had a long history. The old public hall in Alexandra Street was built in 1872 and became the Empire Theatre. It burnt down in 1895 and was completely rebuilt. In 1919, the theatre closed for a major conversion. This architect's drawing featured on the opening night brochure shows how the new Rivoli super cinema was to appear. Its interior was similarly grand, with elaborate plasterwork on the walls and ceilings and rich fabrics and decorations throughout. In reality, the Rivoli retained much of the appearance of the old empire, but for many years it was the borough's most opulent cinema. It boasted 6 private boxes at balcony level between the stalls and the circle, and a centrally placed purpose-built projection room. The balcony extended along both sides of the auditorium. When the closure of the ABC was announced in September 1997, our camera crew were invited to record the interior of the building for the film archive. We made some exciting discoveries. Walled up in a long closed room below the circle were a mass of papers, invoices and hundreds of letters relating to the conversion of the building from the Empire Music Hall to Rivoli Super Cinema in the 20s. The dust and dirt of 80 years covered this unique collection, which included a roll of wallpaper of the type that once hung in the upper balcony foyer. Many cigarette cartons of long-forgotten brands, chocolate boxes and a waxed Kiora drink carton. Records of staff wages. Specifications and an invoice for the purchase of the cinema's first organ. Programs for the week's attractions. The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse was a box office sensation. The silent masterpiece put leading man Rudolph Valentino on the road to overnight stardom. When it played the Rivoli Super Cinema, it did so to packed houses every night. Among the papers were these books of front balcony ticket stubs. The film was accompanied by a 12-piece orchestra as well as the cinema's organ. Standard chief reporter Jeff Percival was among the first to explore some of the old and disused parts of the empty cinema. Jeff Percival.
It was hard to realise going into the what had been the ABC cinema, that in fact, long before the cinema use, it was a music hall and a theatre. But when we had a chance to walk around and could go behind the stage, it became quite clear what the original use had been. There was a wall covering still there, as if almost in a time warp. And this was to persist all the way around as we walked around what had once been the Empire Theatre, then the Rivoli Cinema, and finally the ABC. Going downstairs, it was possible to see a staircase which the public hadn't seen for something like 60 or 70 years. And there, in place on the walls, were still signs saying, "To the pits, to the stalls." And this is where, back in the early part of this century, people would have been flocking to take their seats to watch the latest of the music hall stars as they came to Southend. And there it is, still left in 1998. A very strange feeling to try and imagine these crowds as they were. And there is the wallpaper still there. The wallpaper again came back to the 1920s. And very opulent and very plush for its time, because wallpaper was quite a luxury in those days, and certainly this was no cheap wallpaper. This was expensive wallpaper, as befitted the Empire Theatre, one of the flagships of Southend. Now we're turning to the most opulent part of the old theatre, the passageway and the stairs which led up to the boxes, where the true elite of society in the town would come to watch the plays and to see the latest in the music hall artists who were coming to Southend. And here you would see men in their white tie and tail coats and women in beautiful evening dresses with long gloves. Still today, you can still seem to visualise those days as you stand here, despite all the dirt and the rubbish of ages which had collected around us in these virtually deserted parts of the old theatre. This is the hole in the wall. This is one of the most remarkable discoveries made in recent years in the ABC cinema. In here had accumulated and had collected various bits and pieces from all over the years, some dating back to theatrical times and some from a bit later on. You've already seen much of this remarkable collection. This is where it was actually found. Now we're where the nitty-gritty was going on in the days of the theatre. It's hard to realise now, because they just look as if they've been accumulating junk, were in fact the dressing rooms used by the artists in those days. They would be busy with the actual artists themselves getting ready to appear on the stage, and by the others involved, their dressers and the boys shouting for the next act that was ready to come on for the music hall. Since the Empire became a cinema, they've lain unused or just accumulated junk. With the changes that we are going to see there in the near future with the coming of the new Empire Theatre, perhaps there may be a new lease of life for them. Who can tell?
When the house lights went up for the last time on the 22nd of January this year, it looked as though the 124-year-old building would either be demolished or left to decay.
Southend Standard, Tuesday, August the 11th, 1998. Theatre set for the ABC. Community group sets up new stage. The former ABC cinema is set to become a theatre. A group of enthusiasts is setting up a community stage in the old Alexandra Street building. Took the group just 8 days to secure the lease of the building. Now project leaders Daniel and Julie Robertson and financial director Bill Badley are hoping to open at least one stage in 2 to 4 weeks.
Yes, it was in the August. It was August 7th, 1998, when a group of us were sitting anxiously waiting for the phone to ring, informing us that we could pick up the keys for the then closed down ABC cinema here in Alexandra Street. It was at 1:30 that day that Julie finally phoned and said, "We have the keys, we'll meet you down there." And we couldn't get down quick enough. It was very exciting, extremely exciting. We'd been waiting a long time to enter a building to enable us to start the theatre project. Previously, we had tried to occupy the old Colosseum building in Untitled-On-Sea. When it did fall through, it was about a week after that I received a phone call from an anonymous gentleman asking all sorts of questions about the project. And when I asked why, he basically said, "I'm the new owner of the old ABC building, and would we like to have a look around to see if it's suitable?" So we came in on that day, August the 7th, 1:30, and we spent the first couple of hours just looking around the building, finding out where switches were, what sort of state the building was in, and the building was in pretty bad repair at the time. A lot of areas, like the one we're in now, hadn't been used since about 1959, and as you can see, the ceilings are pretty crumbly. It's an old corridor that used to lead to the balconies, which were then closed. A lot of the other areas in the building, including all the old dressing rooms and corridors backstage, were in equally as bad condition, some worse. Some ceilings had actually fallen right through and the floors had disintegrated and it was just mud. But really we were not worried about those areas at the time. The area we were concerned with was getting the stage clear and getting some of our equipment in that we'd collected over the previous years. And there were areas that we didn't even know existed. When we actually said yes, we would like the keys, we would like to occupy the building, we didn't really know whether there were any dressing rooms. Julie had remembered seeing a door on the side of the stage and said, "Oh, there might be some rooms through there." We didn't know. I think that was part of the interesting bit, the mystery of the building. But as I said, the building was in a terrible state. We'd never seen dust like it. The first rainfall we had, I think there was more rain on the stage than there was outside. So of course the first job was to find out where the leaks were, patch them all up, clean the stage, get the old screen down. The carpets were still in the auditorium on the floor, although the seating had been removed. We actually were given 3 months free rent to enable us to get the building up and running before we had to sort any finance out. And that came basically to a very short end, because at the end of the first month a company phoned up, which was the Little Shop of Horrors, and asked to hire the building. Of course we weren't ready. The seats weren't in, or not bolted to the floor. We had a pile of seats at the back, and we didn't know how many, we didn't know how they went together. They were bought second hand from another theatre. All the arms had different angles to allow for the rakes of the old theatre. So we had to sort all these out into categories, put them in lines in the auditorium. And 1 week before the show came in, the company came in and helped us put all the seats together. We hadn't really got the dressing rooms into any suitable order then. There were only 3 rooms, I think, that were usable backstage. The rest of them, as I said before, had the ceilings falling in and no floors. There was no plumbing, there was no toilets backstage. There was no power backstage, so everything was run then on temporary power strings of festoon lamps hanging around the corridors, and old fluorescent hanging on a wall, and 13 amp extension leads everywhere. It's not like that now.
By Saturday 19th of September, the theatre doors were again open to the public. Over the weekend, hundreds of visitors, many from outside the borough, flocked into Southend's latest multi-purpose arts venue. Julie Robertson.
I think when we had our open day on Saturday and Sunday, it was actually proved by people's comments that there is some kind of atmosphere within this building that lends itself to a theatre. The comments were made that there was a nice ambience about the place. It lent itself to a theatre and possibly to a cinema as well, but maybe this is the time and the right date, the right people have come along to actually convert this back to a theatre and use it as it was meant to be used.